If you're pouring your heart into your podcast, but still struggling to turn those listeners into paying clients, I've got something just for you. Imagine having a clear, simple plan to turn your listeners into buyers without relying on a huge audience or spending hours on social media. That's exactly what we'll create together in a podcast profit plan discovery call. During this free 20-minute call, I'll help you discover more opportunities for profit in your podcast and give you the next best step to turn your show into a client attracting machine. If I've got an offer that will help you expedite this process, then we can also discuss working together. Book your free podcast profit plan discovery call now by going to podcastingformoms.co/profit plan or by clicking the link in the show notes. I can't wait to chat with you. Picture this. You've been podcasting for 6 months. You're showing up every single week, you're recording, editing, and publishing. You genuinely love your topic, your content is solid, and the listeners you do have, they absolutely love you. But your downloads are flatlined. You're getting maybe 40 to 50 listens per episode, and it feels like no matter what you do, you can't crack through to new listeners. You're posting on Instagram, throwing your episodes into Facebook groups, and yet crickets from anyone who doesn't already know that you exist. Here's what most podcasters in that situation do. They assume that their content isn't good enough. They second guess their niche. They consider switching their format, interviewing guests, and maybe going back to grab a better mic. But what if the content is actually fine? What if the problem has nothing to do with what's inside your episodes and everything to do with how they're labeled on the outside? That's what we're digging into today, because podcasters who grow are not always the best podcasters. They're the most findable ones. And there's a real fixable strategy gap between those two groups. It's called podcast SEO, and most of us are getting it wrong. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the show for moms in business ready to start, grow, and scale a podcast that turns their listeners into buyers. I'm Jenny Sonneson, a podcast strategist and fellow mom entrepreneur. You're in the right place if you want to learn how to start and grow a podcast that attracts your ideal clients and really does the heavy lifting for you when it comes to selling your offers, all while balancing life as a busy mom. Are you ready to create a podcast that grows your income, impact, and influence? Let's make podcasting work for you, because as moms, we know how to get things done. All right, let's jump into the episode. Hey, and welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the show for mom entrepreneurs who are wanting to use their podcast as their main marketing channel. I'm Jenny Sonneson, podcast strategist and producer, and every week I'm here to help you build a podcast that doesn't just sound good, but actually works as a business tool. Let's get into it. Okay, so today's episode is one of the ones that I wish existed when I first started, because podcast SEO is one of those topics that sounds technical and maybe a little bit boring, but I promise you it's not. It's actually the most straightforward lever that most podcasters have never pulled. We're talking about the specific mistakes that are making your show invisible to the exact people who need it. And by the end of the episode, I want you to have one clear action step that you can take today. All right, let's go. So the first mistake is that you're writing episode titles for your current listeners, not for new ones. So here's the thing about episode titles. When you've already built an audience, you can get a little bit cute with them. Your community knows you, they trust you, they'll click on almost anything that you put out. But when you're still growing, your titles are the first and sometimes only thing a stranger sees before deciding whether to hit play or not. And here's where it gets painful. Most podcasters write titles that sound great to the people who already know them, but mean absolutely nothing to someone who's searching for their help. So let me give you an example here. Say you're a health coach for moms, and you title your episode, My Journey to Feeling Like Myself Again. That is a wonderful title. It's emotionally resonant. Your current audience will totally click it. But a mom who's typing in how to lose weight after having a baby into places like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, she's never going to find that episode. The title doesn't match anything that she's currently searching for. Let's compare that to how to lose the baby weight without giving up the foods that you love. Now we're talking. That title answers a search query. It puts the results in the title, and it uses the exact language someone is typing into a search bar. That is what podcast SEO optimized titles do. They meet your ideal listener in the language she's already using to search for answers. So the first mistake is naming your episode based on how they feel rather than how they'll be found. I want you to ask yourself this. If my ideal listener typed her biggest struggle into Apple Podcasts right now, would my episode title show up? Would it even come close? If the answer is no, then that's something we need to work on. The second thing is that your episode descriptions are a summary, not a search tool. And this is something I see all the time. Someone puts real thought into their episode, they record a great conversation or just a great solo episode, and then their episode description reads something like this. In this episode, I talk about burnout and why it happens. We also cover tips for managing your energy. That description tells me what happened in the episode, but it doesn't do anything in terms of discoverability. Podcast platforms use your episode title and your description to understand what your episode's about and when to surface it in search results. So if your description isn't keyword rich, then you're essentially invisible in search. But here's the nuance. Keyword rich does not mean keyword stuff. So you don't need to cram in 30 different keywords and make it unreadable. What you need is intentional language. So I want you to think about specific phrases your ideal listener is Googling. Things like podcast marketing strategy for moms, or how to grow a podcast without social media, or podcast monetization tips for beginners. Those are all things people would be searching for and finding those are all things people would be searching for if they were looking to find a show like mine. Those phrases should be living inside your episode descriptions, woven naturally into a description that still reads like a human wrote it. Your description also needs to do double duty. It needs to get your episode found, but it also needs to compel someone to actually hit play once they find it. Those are two very different jobs, and your description needs to do both. So I want you to structure it like this. Open with a hook that speaks directly to the problem that the listener is searching for. Then you want to include 2 to 3 specific searchable phrases naturally within the body of the content. Then you want to close with a clear statement of what they'll walk away with learning from the episode. A great description is between 150 to 250 words, enough to be substantive, but not so long that it loses people. And then we have the third thing. You're treating your show name and podcast category like afterthoughts. Okay, so this one might sting a little bit because it's one of those things that most people set up once and then they never touch again. Your show name and your podcast category are SEO real estate, and a lot of people are wasting them. So let's start with your show name. If your show is called the Sarah Thompson Podcast, you are leaving an enormous amount of discoverability on the table. Names that include relevant keywords, your niche, your audience, or your transformation get found at higher rates than personality-based names or, your general first and last name with no descriptive context. So for example, my podcast is called Podcasting for Moms, and Podcasting for Moms works because it tells you exactly who it's for. A mom who's looking for podcasting content can find it. Someone searching for business podcasts for moms can find it. The name does the SEO work for me. If you already have an established show name, then this doesn't mean that you need to rebrand, but it does mean that you should look at your subtitle, which is basically a second shot at an SEO-rich description. Use it. Now let's talk categories. So when you set up your podcast on your hosting platform, you select a category. Most people pick the broadest one that feels vaguely relevant and then move on. But your category affects which charts you appear on, how you show up in platform browsing, and how Apple Podcasts and Spotify understand your show. So in my opinion, it's important to niche down here. If there's a subcategory that fits you better than the parent category, use it. It's less competition, and it's a more accurate signal to the algorithm about who should be shown your show. Okay, so before we do the recap, I want to call out one specific thing that I want you to stop doing immediately. So I want you to stop writing episode titles that would make sense at a dinner party, but make zero sense in a search bar. You know what I mean? The titles that are super clever, a little cryptic, maybe a little poetic. They feel right when you're in the creative headspace of making content. But here's the reality. No one is searching for something like episode 47 when you finally stop hiding. They're searching for things like how to show up confidently on social media or how to stop playing small in your business. The transformation goes in the title. The searchable outcome goes in the title. Clever is great, but only when it's in addition to clear. It cannot replace clear. If you're not sure if your titles are findable, go open Apple Podcasts or Spotify right now and search for the topic your last 3 episodes covered. Did your show come up? If the answer is no, then you have a title problem. If the answer is no, then that means you have a title problem. All right, so let's bring it all home. The 3 podcast SEO mistakes hiding your show from ideal listeners. Number 1, writing episode titles for your current audience instead of for search. Your titles need to use the language that your ideal listener is already typing into the search bar, not language that only lands if they're already a part of your existing audience. The second mistake is using your episode description as a summary instead of as a search tool. Descriptions need keywords, they need a hook, and they need to give someone a reason to hit play once they find the episode. And then the third mistake is treating your show name and category as one-time decisions. Your show name and subtitle are SEO real estate, and your category determines your discoverability within the platform. Both deserve a second look. All right, here is your one action step from today's episode. I want you to go into your podcast hosting platform right now and pull up your last 5 episode titles. Read them like a stranger would. Better yet, go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and type in the topic of each episode and see if your show shows up anywhere in the result. If it doesn't, then that's your homework. Rewrite those titles with searchable keywords. Put the outcome in the title. Use language your ideal listener is already using when she goes looking for help. And if you want eyes on your full podcast strategy, including your titles, descriptions, show name, and everything else that's either helping or hurting your discoverability, I do podcast audits, and it's literally one of my favorite things. You can grab yours by going to podcastingformoms.co/audit. I will also leave the link in the show notes for you as well. All right, that is it for today's episode. If this episode was helpful for you, will you do me a favor and share it with a fellow mom podcaster? Word of mouth is still the best algorithm, in my opinion. I'll be back next week with more strategy to help you build a podcast that actually works for your business. Until then, take care of yourself, keep showing up, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning into Podcasting for Moms. I hope today's episode gave you the tools and inspiration you need to make your podcast work smarter, not harder. If you love what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It means the world and helps other moms in business find the show. For more tips, resources, and support, head to podcastingformoms.co. Remember, you're not just building a podcast, you're building your legacy. Until next time, friends.